Hello there, good people. It's Stuart Bell here, business coach and founder of the Practice Evolutions coaching program. And if you are a long-time listener of this podcast, you might remember when I sat down not that long ago with the team at Atlis, which include, of course, Taylor Bindon, to talk about an app, or I guess an application, a program they built specifically for financial planning businesses called MOAS. And you might remember I asked them about the name of it. MOAS apparently stands for Mother of All Spreadsheets, which is, a pretty clever name. And at the time, I was really impressed with the tool. I was impressed with what it did. And I guess the reason for being impressed was partially because it was a tool that had been adopted and used by one of my longest serving and largest clients. And they'd found it an excellent platform for managing a multi-disciplinary advice firm. About a year and a half's gone since that initial podcast. And since then, the tool has progressed, the business has progressed, its use with it, Taylor and the team have progressed, and I've had the opportunity to be involved in a very small way in that progression, and it's really come on leaps and bounds. Now, this is not just a spiel or me pitching a product. It is down to the fact that right now in the financial service industry, there is a real challenge that is coming up with technology, and I presented on this at the recent Risk in Focus roadshow, where we went all around Australia and I spoke about technology and AI and all of these really interesting things for advice firms. And one of the reflections I had as part of preparing for this session and something I shared in the presentation was the fact that over the last 10 years, there's been so many new advice solutions come into the market. I'm talking about the idea of having a financial planning software where you can potentially run your whole business off it. It includes workflow, production of plans, it includes dashboard work, it includes CRM, all of these things that we know go into being able to manage clients and deliver advice and do all those great things. But this increase in the number of tools out there hasn't necessarily resulted in businesses finding it easier to select tools. In fact, you'd probably say it's been the opposite. And that's why I wanted to revisit this particular discussion, because I wanted to talk a little bit about where things have progressed. I want to talk about where it's going to go, but also wanted to share the kind of leaps and bounds that a team who are really focused on that single source of truth that can do everything, but do it in a really good way, solution I'm looking at. So I hope you enjoy this. If you haven't listened to the first podcast, it won't matter. You'll get a lot out of this, but it'll give you some insights into what's going on in the back room and of a small team who are developing a software solution with the intention of enabling businesses like yours to be more efficient, to be able to do everything in one place and ultimately produce advice in half the time it enables them to do. If you love this, by the way, please do go and check out their site at MOAS app, MOAS app.com, APP. And of course, please just take a moment to leave a review. Obviously, a 5-star one would be great, and let others know what you think of this podcast. With that said, let's get stuck into this masterclass with Taylor Bindon and the team at MOAS. Give you a bit of background. I was first introduced to Taylor and the team at MOAS. They're a very close-knit team, very, very good at what they do, through a client who started implementing this in their business. And it's been since that time, and I did a podcast last year where we dived into some of it. But I remember on that podcast at the time, there were a few people came along and they looked at the functionality of the tool and they loved it, but there were certain things that they wanted it to be able to do. And I wanted to come back and visit it because I've seen how the tool has developed. I've seen the journey it's been on, and I've seen where it's got to now. And it's one of those things that I think is well worth sort of revisiting. Not to mention, Taylor is usually full of sort of really interesting insights into where technology is going. And I think it's interesting when I think about technology. You've got people in our industry that are deeply, deeply involved in the industry, and they can see everything really clearly. And then you got on the other side, you've got people who are deeply, deeply involved in tech industry. But I think Taylor, because of and the team, because of the journey they've been on with implementing this, they've got this unique duality where they can look at the functionality, they can look at what's needed with a degree of separation, because they're not sort of involved in some of the traditional thinking about, what software should and shouldn't do. But similarly, they have this deep insight. And I was talking to them last week about MOAS, and the thing I love about it, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who first introduced the idea of 10 years in the wilderness. And the idea there is he was talking about the fact that, a lot of great thinkers in the world, like the Van Gogh and even the Einstein to some degree, they spend a lot of time honing their craft before they necessarily put it out there. And it's interesting because MOAS has been as a tool has been on this journey. a lot of people might not only be hearing about it now, but it's a tool that has been practically implementing and improving within a financial planning business and just getting better and better. So it's almost like coming out like a fully formed baby, so to speak. That's a terrible analogy, but anyway, let's jump into this. Taylor, you there?
G'day, Stu. I am here. How you doing?
Mate, I am really, really well. Yeah, it's Friday. I've got past a couple of tech gremlins, which seems to be the case at the moment. But where are you at?
Yeah, actually, same deal. Friday feeling's always good. It's back-to-back meetings today, which is nice. So it keeps me out of the code for a day, which is a good change.
Do you spend a lot of time? Is that your passion normally, the coding thing, or?
Yeah, the vast majority of time. The team and I, we sit down pretty much 9 to 5 every day, and it's code back to back to back, which is pretty unusual. Like a lot of the days broken up, but obviously in bigger tech companies, but obviously as a small team, I mean, it's our bread and butter, and we just have to get on with it. So,
you've always struck me as someone who is very. I want to choose my words very carefully. You're very social and you're very friendly, and a lot of coders I meet don't necessarily have that skill set.
Yeah, it's funny. Hey, I've always had that. The advice when I was at school and uni was go and do law because you can talk underwater, right? And it was a bit too dry for my liking. I did test it out, but I was always really interested in technology, so that sort of kept drawing me back to science, technology. The main passion was physics, and which has led to coding. A lot of computational physics and science. So yeah, I've got the gift of the gab, and hopefully half a bit of science theory behind me as well.
That would help. I mean, like maths, I imagine, is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of the science has a very logical approach to it. Even physics and complex math or calculus and that sort of stuff, you have this sort of very linear logical approach where you can work through problems, and yeah, that certainly applies all the way back down to the code.
How do you just getting the coding questions out of the way up front, like how do you deal with it? Seems like every couple of years there's a completely new programming language comes along. It's Python or Ruby. Is it Ruby on Rails? And it just pops, and that's the latest thing. How do you deal with that as someone who's a coach? Do you just pick a code to stick with it, or do you try and evolve your skill set?
That's a great question. So I think a lot of the general consensus is that people get confused, I think, is that all of these languages all do the same thing, but they really don't. Like Python, fantastic for data analytics, high performance computing. It's used a lot with AI because obviously it needs to, the way you can manage it is really in depth. Yep. Then you've got your likes of C and C++, which is sort of closer to the hardware level where you can fine tune games and computing performance. Right. And then what we do is it's in JavaScript, right? Well, JavaScript's the basis for it. And yeah, that's primarily a web development language. So there's a lot of breadth across the different languages. So most of the time new stuff will pop up, which is sort of like nice to keep on the radar. Like in our environment, we could use Python for a few things, but at the moment we sort of don't. It's not a necessity. So it's really interesting when you see it come up. I love like reading about it and finding out more, but you sort of have to step back and go, okay, we don't need to change the whole code base just yet.
I know one of the things I've known from seeing sort of some of the speeches is Jobs was not a fan of Java. In fact, I think he's openly critical of it. He talked about it being a memory hog, and what was that all about?
Yeah, so Java was an interesting one. It's still highly prevalent in the industry now, more so as I'd say probably legacy code. Like a lot of people using Java would have had it implemented early 2000s, and the application has stayed with it. I think particularly with Jobs, right? They would have been doing a lot of C++ stuff that's closer to hardware interfacing, and that you can do the same stuff without Java. So Java sort of gives you the same tools, but without as much depth as C and C++ can go. So I think that's sort of where it came from. Was like he might have come from an era where he was used to that more detailed, fine-grained control approach that Java sort of tried to abstract a little bit.
Okay. And like, does anybody ever code in just pure raw code, or is that just that's a Hollywood myth?
Oh, Hollywood myth, 100%. Okay. Even the hackers you see on the TV, like the bash script and that sort of stuff, you can only get so far with that before you need other tools. And it's really interesting, right? Like you can do a lot of manipulation and computational control from a bash script, like figuring out how much memory you want to use for what task and all that sort of stuff. But you can use that with other languages as well. I think security is a good one, right? Like generally denial of service attacks and things like that will be scripted. Someone's not actually on the other end bashing away, typing keys in and all that sort of stuff. They're actually sending out an automated script and it just goes and does it and doubles down on what it's doing most of the time. So yeah, a bit of a myth, I think.
There's a really great article if you're interested. It was in Wired magazine a few months back, but it was, do you remember it was like 2016 when Facebook went down, everything went down, Twitter. Basically, it was a massive denial of service attack. And at the time, everyone thought it was Russia. And it turned out to be these three high school kids who basically built, they basically built a program. I can't remember what it's called, but it would infect the Internet of Things. At any point in time, they have all these little programs running on routers, and they could just bring down things, and it was incredible. And it's a fairly basic program, and my understanding of it, it's still out there circulating around, and just very simple stuff, which took down everything. I don't think it can do it as much anymore, but it's interesting stuff. Man.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of becomes the risk of everything connected, right? When your toaster's on the Wi-Fi connected to your network, what have we got security practices on the toaster? I don't know.
Well, not to mention, I think the one thing, it wasn't that long ago, people were talking about the issue with pacemakers.
Really?
Pacemakers is at the time there was a connection thing. It was like, wow, they're relatively easy to hack into the whatever the connection was, and that's something you don't want hacked. Your pacemaker.
Oh, that's the
very easy way of causing a bunch of problems. Man, I could sit here and talk to you about coding all day long and ask you hundreds of questions. But I really also want to talk about the tool, because last time we spoke, I don't know how much you clearly remember where you guys were at, but you built something that you rolled it out, and it was very much focused at the time, predominantly on the reviews process. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So we sort of started with the CRM and then, online data access, that sort of stuff, and then moved into the review process.
So talk us through what's changed in the period between, last time we spoke to you and what you got now. What's been the journey?
Man, well, first and foremost, we pretty much just after we spoke, there was a major software update for us, like the software that we run the software on. So,
right.
I was talking about trying not to rebuild apps all the time, but we definitely went and did that straight away. And we just had another great improvement to like speed and all that sort of stuff. So all the technical stuff goes on in the background. But where we were at was, we had the CRM up and running. We had online data access throughout a whole practice, right? So who's on first, what's on second, and being able to see the client's perspective. So, for example, we were implemented originally in a multi-discipline practice. So it was really important for the property and finance guys to be across loans, properties, and also obviously the financial planning guys have to be across that as well. So having that source of truth and that one picture was where we started. And then we sort of went, okay, well, now we've got all this data online. How can we leverage that to start doing the bread and butter of giving advice, which is, producing your documents and getting things out, getting your product to your clients to give advice. And SOAs at the time, this was pretty fresh after the Royal Commission. SOAs at the time just became this 120-page document thing. And we went, look, right now we don't really want to do the compliance basket. We want to figure out, take a smaller piece of the pie. So we started with annual reviews and ROAs, interim reviews as well. And we went, okay, well, our main goal is to obviously make this more efficient and also make it client friendly. So my business partners, so Lara, my wife, and Sammy, our other business partner, we all sought advice at a similar time while we were at uni and coming into our careers and that sort of stuff. And the advice was great, but the document was 120 pages long, right? And we were like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? And Carolyn, my mum, she's a planner. And I was like, well, look, what's the go? What's going on? And she said, oh, well, we're downloading this and pulling this off Excel, and then we try and merge it all into a Word document. And Lara, Sammy, and I sort of went, okay, we understand the picture here now. So our first major advice component, if you will, was the records of advice and annual reviews, and making sure that we can get the data to flow straight in, so you don't have to merge things and download this and update that, so that it's all a seamless online experience instead of having to try, the countless things that go wrong with the word merging is unfathomable, so
Can
we wanted to.
Can we dive into that a little bit? Because I remember I was at MLC in the early 2000s, and they spent $265 million on a system called Amazon, which ironically I might have caused a copyright breach a few years later. But anyway, and one of the things that advisors loved is we had this kind of macro that just used to go through and write the document. But of course, when you actually get down to it, it broke more times than it didn't. Actually getting something like that to populate a document like an ROA or even SOA, that's not an easy piece of work. Would it be right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you walk us through how you make it happen and what some of the I'm asking for the perspective because I think sometimes when you get a peek in behind what it actually takes to do something, you suddenly start to realize, okay, that's actually a lot more complicated, and you start to have a great appreciation for the functionality you're trying to create. Can you walk us through sort of how you were able to pull it together so it was creating a coherent and good looking document, and what were some of the challenges that you had?
Yeah, great question. So we started dissecting the process first of all, right? So giving advice as a business process. What do we do first? Do we check all the data? Then do we pull that into the document? And how does all that fit together as just like a probably a map, I'd say, like a process map, so that we can understand where we need to start and where we need to finish. And then we looked at the moving pieces in between, right? And we sort of drew this analogy at the time that general tools are for general work. And you don't want to take a hammer to a screw and try and put that in the wall, right? You should actually use the screwdriver instead of the hammer in that situation. And I think that was sort of one of the pitfalls, was that the general tools were being manipulated in such a way that they were built so you could do that, but the restrictions around it make it really tricky to do that. So
can you give me an example?
Yeah, look, the word merging is a classic, right? Like Word documents first and foremost are built out so that you write a document and save it and format it, and it looks fantastic, and you send it off as like a letter almost, right? It was designed to write communicative documents in the early days, right? And then all of this extensibility,
basically a typewriter.
Yeah, online typewriter, right? So all of the extensibility came later. And Microsoft Excel is another good example. Like Visual Basic and coding Excel documents is as part and parcel of the advice industry. But again, it was more so for that stuff got added in later. It was more so for the generic math and actually spreadsheeting and tabular information instead of writing it by hand, it was miles faster than writing it by hand. I'm sure anyone that's ever looked at a physical spreadsheet will attest to that, right? But it wasn't built for that. So those are the two things that we were sort of like, look, if we can abstract a lot of the calculations so it's not manual, obviously, that's a huge piece of the pie already. Okay. And then setting up a process online where instead of you have to merge and you have to do this and bring it all together, it should already be there, right? We know that the document is generally going to fall within a certain page range. We know that if we have a process where we can provide comments and recommendations, that we can fit that to the document, and then we can sort of manage the layout and set up from there. So that was our initial goal, was to sort of give that structure to the document without that extensibility added on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I remember when the SOS first started to get like ridiculous, there were so many working groups. I think the FPA had one going. I know ASIC set one up to actually look at the structure. And I think if you start with the structure of the document, you're kind of going well, but it's a hard thing to get right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much information, it doesn't flow.
And even today, there's still groups talking about, well, what actually is a goal, and where should we put the goals in the document? Is that going to blow everything out of proportion? Well, ASIC says one thing about goals, we say the other. So, actually trying to come to a rational conclusion about that is the difficult thing as well.
So, again, you've got a multidisciplinary firm, right? And I want to talk more about the implementation challenges of this, because adoption is kind of everything, and everybody's got different expectations of what they should have to do. But how did you manage the fact that you're ultimately creating a tool that's going to be used and generate documentation, and every planner or every person is probably going to have a different way of talking to the advice? Did you get a lot of pushback? Did you get a lot of feedback, or did you really have to sell it in?
Yeah, really interesting. So when we did the reviews, right, we had this process where you verify the data, just check it was updated. If it hadn't been, update it. Then you'd go through and set up your models and your goals, and then you'd go through and write your comments and recommendations, and then you'd have a preview of the document, and it would all be there. And in the beginning, right, we had the multidiscipline firm had 3 sort of subdivisions, right, for different types of clients. So accumulators, retirees, professionals, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And some of the advisors sort of came across in that regard in the beginning. They were like, hey, look, I don't know if it really feels how I want it to feel. And we're like, okay, well, look, obviously we can have different layouts so that you can put it in the structure that you feel represents the way you want to give advice. But the majority of it was the comments and recommendations, actually getting down to the meat and veg of the advice. It's not really about the layout. It's actually what you say on the page. Because you could have 20 pages on salary packaging, right? But if you can't actually say in a paragraph what that impact is for the client and why you're recommending that, then that 20 pages is just all gibberish, right? So we had some really interesting discussions in the beginning that was more about being able to give more concise advice instead of trying to pad out documents to feel like you're delivering more to the client, because oftentimes less is more, quite literally, If the client can understand it in a paragraph and a model, you're already winning the battle there. And if you've got your supplemental information, then that's where the extra padding comes in. It shouldn't be that 20 pages. So yeah, it was a bit of give and take, but I think generally the way that people give advice has changed a lot in the last 5-6 years since we've been operating as well.
How so?
I think, like I said, that can push to conciseness.
Right. Okay.
Like the ASIC and QAR stuff coming out now, they've gone, look, whatever we're doing right now isn't really flying and not really working. And that's predominantly right from a client's perspective. And that was where we came from in the beginning. We went, look, this 120 pages, it's cool that it's there, but I don't get it, and we don't need tables of information to explain that over a 30-year period, your investment may increase 5%, right? That's a very generic projection, right? But we don't need 3 pages of tables within the document to convey that to the client. And I think it was sort of changing perspectives on that, right? You have your models and your projections, and then all the extra stuff is like your supplemental appendices information. So it was sort of changing. Well, I think what we've seen with a lot of advisors using MOAS now, and even where they're coming from, is they want to get to that concise point.
Right.
So we've had a recent sign up that was coming from a bigger firm where things have to be a certain way, and he's gone, look, I'm giving some straightforward platform management advice. Like, why can't I make this easier? So I think we've consistently had that theme when we've been talking to advisors.
That's been my experience as well. Like, the last year and a half, the work that I've been doing with advisors is usually about removing things from the process. Like, people are looking for, even in the training we do, they want to shorten it. They want simpler. Conciseness is definitely a thing. So ROIs were the first one you took aim at.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to take a piece of the pie, not the whole pie in one gulp. And it was a great place to start because it's really consistent structure. It's really consistent themes and messages that you want to convey to a client. And what we did initially was the firm we were working with had a long-term progress model, which shows, if you've been with the client for 10 years, it shows how they've developed over that time. So the main thing for us was that was the majority of the review, right? It's not, okay, well, your account's gone up 10 grand. We're now predicting that 5% growth over 30 years with an extra 10 grand. It's actually, well, how have we gone in the last 12 months,
Yeah. And this is an important point to make, because this is something when you and I first talked about, I think we had this conversation. I said, that's the one thing that you got some tools will do it, but they'll do it in this ridiculous calculation way that you look at it and go, I don't know what that's trying to say, or it's not there. And ultimately I used to draw a picture on a diagram and say, look, you need to be able to, if there's a line between we started here and this is where the client's going to get to, you need to be able to show where they are, and you need to be able to show where they're above and beyond the line. And that was something that you and the team are really strongly of the opinion that you should be able to, that should be front and center. It's like, this is where you've come. This is where you come in the last 12 months. This is where you come in the whole time working with us. And that's what, I love that.
Yeah, that was a huge one for us as part of the review. So, it's not necessarily, like we said, we can project until the cows come home, but it was sort of actually being able to provide that picture to the client. And that made it a lot easier as a process to be able to structure that in a certain way as well.
How much has the modeling progressed?
Oh, massively. I mean, we had some pretty straightforward retirement planning projection models, some offsetting and some loan repayment modeling. Right. And then, assets and liabilities, total asset worth, net wealth, all that sort of stuff, asset allocation. Now, we're looking at property growth, property value, super splitting, super with and without insurance, extra contributions, withdrawals, all that stuff in between as well. And then the tax calcs. Oh, mate, I think we're at 22, 25 models at the moment. And we came from maybe 8.
Cool. And is it hard to produce the kind of modeling that you do in the software?
It isn't. So, we, obviously took an Excel spreadsheet to start with, and that was, where all the modeling was. So we went and transcribed that into code. The best part about the code is that you can then verify it and test it after the fact. So if we have an offset model, say, a great example, right? $100,000 loan, $50,000 offset. What does that look like over 30 years? Or when is that going to be paid off? How much interest will we save? Yep. We can actually write tests to verify all of that stuff along the way. So, even if we go and change something, the test might then be wrong. So we can come back and go, oh, actually, even though we thought we were making an improvement there, we've missed something there. So relatively speaking, it was quite straightforward. The majority of it is repeating over time. So it's the same thing the next year, but with slightly different variables. So it's bread and butter coding, right? Like a for loop iterating through different sets of data is our daily grind. So
I guess that's why you can build it in Excel, because if it's a simple thing, you can build it in Excel. Once it gets harder, it's difficult to do. So you get the modeling, you got the ROAs coming in. Was the next thing the statement of advice, or did you introduce other functionality first?
Yeah, so in between that, we sort of monitored and watched what was happening with the review and the ROAs, and making sure that was obviously smooth and hunky-dory. Then we started working on some workflow management. And the workflow management is sort of part and parcel, right? Like we have to have it so that you can track your work and what you're doing with your ROAs. So that came next, but the SOA was always in the back of our mind. Throughout that whole process, we were looking at the SOA spreadsheets and documents and information we had available so that we could start planning how we were going to tackle that and what structures we needed to put in place.
Talk to me about workflow, because everyone's got different ideas of workflow. Some people, you talk to them about workflow and they think of it as a Trello board. Other people talk about workflow and it's like Gantt charts and all sorts of things. And my experience has been you can have a really, really complex workflow that doesn't work, and you can have simplistic workflow that doesn't really do the job. And you've also got this thing about any workflow system doesn't work unless people actually use it. Like when you talk about the workflow you've built, give me the context, give me the scope. Like, give me what you actually, in your mind, workflow should do.
Yeah, okay. That's a good question, actually, because sort of I think what we've built is something that I would use quite often. And it's sort of already, we took a lot of inspiration, creative freedom, if you will, from a lot of the workflow management tools we use for coding.
What would they be?
Well, primarily was Trello. We were using that for all of our like day-to-day issues and bugs and things. And then GitHub released a lot of tech companies like using Jira, and Jira is an Atlassian product, and it's really great, really well featured. It didn't really work for us because we're a smaller team. It's great if you're in a huge, massive corporation where you've got 30 or 40 different people that you probably won't see throughout the day. But for us, because we're so close knit, we needed something a bit more on the nose than that.
I had a look at Jira, and again, it's a very powerful tool, but I was like, no, it's not designed for businesses like us.
Totally, yeah. So GitHub is where we store our code, and they implemented a workflow management tool, and they basically had a project which had tasks, and those tasks could then have like checklists in them, right? So we took a lot of inspiration from that and went, you know what, this works really well for us. It would be really interesting to see if we can break it down to that level for advice firms as well. And in a sense, it's a similar process, right? If you've got your ROA, the first, so what we do is we do projects, phases, and tasks. Yeah. And then opportunities are sort of their standalone thing. And you can have tasks without projects and all that sort of stuff. Opportunities are about identifying value that's coming to your business. So you might have a new client sign up, new advice. You might have a client returning for an ROA and you're expecting a certain fee for that. So that's stuff that you can either win or lose and track and keep on top of. And then the projects, phases, and tasks, right? So project may be, let's say strategy scoping, right? So a pre-advice consult. So it would be, quick chat with the client, organizing data, setting up access to things, and then actually conducting the meeting to scope out the advice. So that could be, each of those steps could be a different phase that could then have tasks within that. And one task, right? Like a good example, one task could be a change of address form, right?
Yep.
But within that, you might actually have 10 or 20 different platforms that you're going to change the address on. So does that make sense? That's a lot of information.
I was going to say, I mean, do you have anything, Julio, good to see you again, by the way, Julio, it's been a while. Do you have anything you could kind of show us? So give us a bit of a visual of what the workflow looks like. Cause I mean, I you know me, I think you and I have talked about workflow, and my attitude is if you get the workflow right and you get the team communicating, everything else kind of follows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
That's a good quiz.
So I've got
to say this one thing. I've got to give kudos to the rest of the team. I mean, the layout and the look and the fairly intuitive way this is organized is just incredible. And I know you a lot of what you do is you sit down and you work through the user experience, but it's, I mean, compared to some tools out there, and even ones that are well designed, where you have, you can get somewhere 5 different ways, and you get in there and you're trying to work out how to back out. This is really, really simple.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the things is that, we come from a tech background, and I always say that we get all the cool tech stuff first, and then that sort of gets commercialized and transferred to other industries.
Yeah.
So, this is something that particularly Lara has a very strong UX background, studied UI UX at uni as well as long as coding. So that helps massively. I mean, I'm pretty useless when it comes to actually putting things on the page. I can link up the data behind the scenes, but yeah, Lara and Sammy do a fantastic job of putting this together.
It's definitely a skill set. Like, no, you can see it. I mean, like, I'll just, for people listening to the podcast, it's really simple. There's an interface down the left, and we've got tasks, opportunities, and templates, and it just opens out from there. It's really simple. So talk us through it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just don't mind if there's a lot of tasks in here. I'm on the test website on the admin account, so I can pretty much see everything going on at the moment. So what we went with was a similar style to tools that we use, right? So You've got your general information here, what teams are assigned, when the project's starting and ending, when it was last updated, which tags you want to put on it so that you can filter by things.
And would that be, you can set those up, so like team, a type of advice, client stage, it's literally like a tagging system.
Yeah, 100%. So a good one is Christmas hampers. We set up, one of our firms sets up a Christmas hampers project at the end of the year, and they tag all the clients that are receiving it. They set up all the projects and run through that.
Like power referrers would be another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then look, these are our phases, right? And phases are very simple. So the way we use phases primarily is for a bit of monitoring and metrics. Like if something's been closed at a certain stage, how many of those projects have fallen through at that phase specifically?
So this, so this is breaking down long multi-step processes into kind of almost like Kanban boards, right? So this is first contact, first appointment, strategy, preparing advice. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, bingo. Straight onto it. Cool. So, pre-review prep and then actual review prep. So pre-review prep could be a call, printing some annual reports, checking Centrelink info, all these sorts of generic admin tasks that you might require. And then the actual review prep, would be like the completing a review, doing your modeling, compliance documentation, fees, reporting, all that sort of stuff as well.
I love the fact that when I look at the boxes underneath, they're full editing boxes. You can have checklists, you have hyperlinks, because that gives you so much flexibility in terms of you can link through to operations manuals. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, totally. So this was a big update that came out with the statement of advice tool. So we went from a linear process, to sort of a free form document with some structure and templating. And what we got out of that was the live editing piece. When you're in here editing these boxes, and same with the document, you'll see who's highlighting things, where cursors are at, who's adding what. And it's really simple stuff like that, right? Where like Figma, Canva, those guys all do this, and they design and sort of content creation platforms. But that's stuff that we used every day. Lara and Sammy use it for UI and UX modeling, and it is brilliant. It saves you so much time. So that was a huge thing that we wanted to focus on as well.
Did you end up implementing templates?
Yeah, we did. So we've got templates for documents, templates for all of the tasking and projects as well. So I'll just show you an example. It looks very much the same. So for example, an annual review template. This one's been edited recently, so I think everything's all in one. But generally what happens, right, is you've got your time frame in what duration you want it. So this will, based on when you start it, it will set out X amount of days or weeks after that is the due date. And same for the task. This could be 0 days from the start date. So the first day it starts.
I love the fact you've got the due option. It can be start date or end date, because there's one of the most well used one is Asana. I can't stand Asana. It's missing so many basic bits of functionality, and that's one of them. It's like for example, a review meeting. You should be able to set up the thread based on when the review date is, but in a lot of tools you can't do it. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. Asana is an interesting one because they started with a very basic tasking system, and it worked really well for just getting high volume stuff done that wasn't necessarily projects or needed to be managed. It was just sort of one-off in items.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even they've got workarounds for you. Create a project and then you copy. It's just like, no, I don't want to be able to do that.
Yeah, totally.
Man, it looks great.
Cheers. Thank you.
Well, what's the? I mean, we've done some work together on the dashboard, and I think that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah. So the dashboard with the admin view, I should apologize. The admin view is pretty bare bones, but this would have your ongoing advice, obviously projects, tasks, and opportunities due today. Yep. And depending on what role you're in within the business would then show different information. Obviously, property and finance guys don't always need to be across ongoing advice. They're probably more relevant to different projects and things that they want to monitor. So yeah.
Nice. I'm actually I've got one of your brochures. I just realized I meant to put it. Jen, can you grab the MOAS brochures? They're in where is it showing in closing folder? They are under old structure, clients and programs curriculum. Can you grab those 3 and pop them in the box for me? And just so people can download them and they get a bit more information. So let's talk like workflow. You got that in. Mm-hmm. Was statement of advice next, or was there something else that was coming down the pipe?
Yeah, well, look, great question. So what I'll do is I'll just jump into a group here. I've just redacted a whole bunch of stuff. So this is the group view, right? So
sorry, I've just taken shared screen off. I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. I'll put it back on. So yeah, this is the group page, and we do things by groups, right? So John and Jane Smith as clients, a couple, for example, that then have entities. That's all under that one group. And this could just be John Smith on his own.
All the information is visible here, right?
Yeah, everything. So
cool.
Contact details, employment notes, all that sort of stuff. We've got our financial data on the left, so offset accounts, loans. We can look at detailed information here. Does it have an offset account registered to it? Is it secured by a property? So this is all stuff that obviously advisors need to know. Also, finance.
This is dummy data, right?
Yeah.
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 I was like, oh, yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So, the account number is 03, right? So if you rock up to Westpac, I don't think they'll give you much on the 03.
You give it a go. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I've probably just outed like their third client ever, So yeah, look, all this stuff we have to be very transparent with, and it has to be there. This is a client that we test on quite often. So they've got loads of loans, loads of liabilities, supers, all that sort of stuff. So getting into the advice side of things, right?
Yeah.
So we've got our advice tab here. And in order to start the advice process, what you do is you'd hit, add advice. And let's say this one's a statement of advice, right? So we'll jump in and have a look at this. And this is this process I was talking about before, right? So this was a similar process for the review that we've tweaked and updated for the statement of advice. So, again, bread and butter stuff that you have to have. You've got to have your team. So you might have, and this is for solo advisors as well. Maybe you've got a third-party accountant that uses your system that needs to be on some stuff. So for the example here, we've got the planning team. We've also got the accounting team and finance team, because these clients have a lot going on with finance, a lot going on with entity structures and accounting as well. So it's really important to have that what's the word? Oh man, visibility across the board.
Transparency, kind of.
Transparency, yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just move through the process. Verify data. This is what we are talking about before. So who's it been updated by when? So 10 days ago by me, right? So I know that this is relatively up to date. And this is sort of to get away from that, there's a value there, I'm just going to run with it, because clients will pick up on that. They'll go, oh, well, that was the property value 12 months ago. We've just had it revalued. What's going on? So it's sort of to try and give advisors and anyone in the system a bit of accountability over, when was this updated, and are we actually giving accurate advice here? That's
a really good point. And this is the one thing that, and I used to see it all the time when practices would use My Prosperity, and they were trying to take control of the cash flow. As soon as the client noticed, if you've got a large body of data, if your data's not right, that will become the topic of the conversation. Oh, that's not right. That's not right. And if you can just stall a meeting. So yeah, being able to, if you're going to have a massive data set, being able to control the I guess the quality and up to dateness of it, that's really important.
Absolutely. And even, you can use it and justify that as well. You can go, hey, look, I know this information's out of date. We're waiting on an RP data report to come back, but just bear in mind that this will be updated with a new value, right? I mean, that's part and parcel of the changing values in advice, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay. So this is all the data input stuff?
Yeah, this is all the data input stuff. It is a spit out basically of the advice page or the financial data page on the group page. So, you can download a CSV, and what a lot of our mortgage and finance guys do is they'll download this CSV, upload that information into their loan writing software, and then that way they're already steps ahead on the loan writing process instead of having to, fiddle with data there.
What's your take? You must get a lot of inquiries or a lot of conversations about digital fact finding, if you like having the ability to provide something to a client, they fill it in for you. Can you give us your experiences with it?
Yeah, great question. So when we started out, the firm we were working with already had My Prosperity as their digital fact find, right?
Right.
And I think they did a really good job of it to start with, right? Where it's a pretty straightforward process for the client. Yes, it's still relatively in depth. So for us, what we've been doing is we've sort of, at the moment, we've let our advisors go with whatever their preferred fact find method is. We're already looking at building a client portal, and we've got the Yodely feeds that we're starting to work with as well. So, it's there. And the main thing for us, right, was when we started, some of the more experienced people in industry said, you know what, you should go and integrate with all of these 20 platforms before you even have a product. And we were
I want to talk about this because you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, well, look, if we go and do that and just grab all the spaghetti and try and pile it together, it's still a glob of spaghetti, right? It's not going to actually give me anything useful out of it. So that's probably a terrible analogy, but it's sort of like that, where if you take all these different components from everywhere, but don't actually have a way to consolidate it, then it's just a regurgitation of what you've already got. Sorry, Stu, go ahead.
And we talked about this last time. It's because if you do go, we're going to integrate 20 different platforms, then you've got to go, what do you call a first name field? And what do you call a first name field? And what do you call it? And then you're getting down to, what do you call, I don't know, the first holding field, and just being able to match all of these fields together and then manage the data that's coming in. That's an extraordinarily, I'm not going to say difficult. It's got to be a finicky and potentially fragile process.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be blunt, 3 of us just straight up couldn't manage it. Even if we did, let's say 6 integrations and one of them had an update over the weekend that we then have to update for, we're not talking Facebook, Google, or Microsoft here, where APIs are versioned and you have a specific version and you can still keep running off that. And that's the way it goes. There's a lot of tools in industry that are, pretty reactive to the way that they change. So if we went and integrated with a bunch of stuff, 2 things changed overnight, we could be in a really sticky situation for months. And so we wanted to avoid that and actually build something that's going to be useful.
Why is that? I mean, you mentioned there that the Googles and the Facebook, obviously they're a lot bigger, but they have protocols and they kind of recognize the fact that we can't just go and change everything overnight because there's people who rely on it. And yet in the industry, and tell me if I've got this wrong, you've got all these platform providers who can just overnight change their data feeds and screw a bunch of people up. Why is that prevalent in this industry?
Great question. I think there hasn't been any standardization around it, really speaking, until open banking sort of came in, because everyone would do their own thing in their own way, right? Like insurance providers, I mean, if you can get insurance data feeds, they would give you their information a way they wanted. Same with a lot of platforms. That some things are really silly, and we're guilty of this on some spots in our app, where you might have an offset account that's called value, right, which is $100, right? But maybe we've got a share portfolio that's amount, right, which is $200, but it's the same thing. It's just called 2 different things. And there was a lot of that. And still is a lot of that. Open banking is really trying to get the reins on that and go, well, look, between this bank and that bank, just call account value or account amount, just call it value, right? So actually standardizing that process is a massive one. Google has a whole list of nomenclature on what you should expect and what things should be called, and then how that's not going to change for some things, you know? So
Yeah.
I think the standardization was missing there, and it was a bit Wild West, and in a way, in a good way, right? There was a lot of innovation with the data feeds and tech in the early stages, and it seemed like we were going to be gung-ho with it. Yeah. And then it sort of petered off, right? Like I've seen examples with traffic light systems where, you know, green is the data feeds working, yellow is the data feeds are a bit tricky today, and then red is it's just not working. And of course, right, you go and check the status and everything's red except for one platform, right? And that's because of that standardization. Like, it's such a tricky thing to keep up with.
Carolyn, last question. This is exactly what I was thinking. Open banking, like when it was announced, it was exciting. It felt like, oh, thank God. And Carolyn says it's 12 months behind. I mean, it feels like it's just been on the back foot from day one. Do you think it's actually going to make that much difference, or do you think it's always going to be on the verge of having an impact?
Yeah, I think it's just adoption, right? Like if you are hesitant about certain technologies, or big players in the game don't want to get involved, then that will hinder progress, right? Like AI is a great one. Everyone thinks AI is 12 months ahead, but the reality is it's sort of it's in a place where it's good, but it's not fantastic, right? So if you're like, this is an interesting one, right? I think if you look at a useful tool and go, yeah, but not now, whereas if you look at a challenging tool and go, yeah, let's use that, it's that timing is really important. I think you have to make the most of what you've got available to you. Yeah. I think open banking is one of those tools in the tool belt that you almost have to have.
Standardization, because otherwise the more complex things get, the more you need some sort of standardization, particularly when you introduce technology, because ultimately, I don't know whether AI is going to help, whether AI is going to be able to sit in between and maybe interpret, well, you know, I know that says account number, but what it actually means is, yeah, possibly. But again, like we were speaking about this before we came on, and I think you and I both share a similar opinion, which is AI is incredibly interesting. It's a real leap forward. I can't think of a leap forward technologically that's happened so quickly since the iPhone, to be really honest. When that trotted out, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's a computer in your pocket." But I think it is being overhyped as to what it can do. I think it's really good at doing certain things, but I certainly wouldn't let an AI tool loose in my inbox. I wouldn't let it send stuff on its own. I wouldn't let it do research. And I think the SEC in the US are of the same opinion. I think ASIC are coming around that AI shouldn't be anywhere near research or portfolio modeling or anything like that for the time being. I think it's great, but I sometimes see people wandering around spruiking AI, and they're the same people who are talking up chatbots and God knows what before. It's a bit of stone soup all over again, right?
Well, and that's a great point. Yeah. So getting back to that open banking point, they've added interest rates, loan expiries, and all that sort of stuff, I think in the last 12 months, right? So, and it's a great point about AI, right? Is it there yet for some specific tasks? No. But generally, how helpful is it? Very, right? Like I think universally we can accept
creating content, rewording content, anything to do with written content, fantastic.
Right? Bingo. So even open banking, now that we've got that bit of extra information, how useful is it? It's actually really useful, right? So having that tool in your tool belt is very important. And the AI hype is huge, right? From a coding perspective, if you're in a big organization, you generally have the funds and the ability to analyze everything in your code base and leverage it to the hilt, which is great. But at the moment, it's sort of commercially, it's sort of at a point where it will help you along the way, but it won't do your job for you. So you still have to, like the specifics with the live updating stuff that we've implemented with the highlighting the cursor and stuff, like AI has no idea what's happening there. The information it has access to on the packages that run that stuff is 12 months out of date, right? So, but can it help me write up a general for loop to print out 10 documents? Yeah, absolutely.
I'm putting together case studies for our bulletproof pricing course that starts next week. And like 5 years ago, I'd have to sit down and have to go through the case studies myself. I just go, hey, get voila, write me 10 case studies for a pricing exercise. These are the information, done. Give me a list of all of the potential tasks that could be considered chargeable in the advisor's business. It's producing content at a very fast rate. It's great. And editing stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've just spotted the time. I want to ask a few more questions, but I love having this conversation with you first because I think some of the technology stuff it's just fascinating, and I love your viewpoint on things. I love what you're doing because for me personally, I've said this to you before. like when I come in and coach businesses, there's two real levers that I need to be able to pull. One is resourcing and the other one is tech. And the issue is, if you've got a business who's got a technology product that just doesn't tick the workflow box, it doesn't tick the dashboard box, it doesn't tick the document, it's hard to use as a CRM. It's impossible to track anything in it. It makes everything hard, and particularly if you've got a software tool where it's just locked down at a higher level so nobody can use it. And I love the way that you guys are developing this in such a way. And it's one of the things I think that is always a problem with some CRMs in the industry or some financial planning tools is they're not built for the end user. They're sometimes built to service a licensee, but you're building this on a real case study to actually service the business itself. So it's awesome. If people want to know more about it and find out like the 100 things that it does that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about, like where would they go and how would they get the first look at it?
Yeah, best place is our website, so moasapp.com. And that has plenty of images. It has the step-by-step process. It's got, how we template our documents and work with you to template them, and then also how to produce the documents. So we sort of got into the advice process a little bit, but there's lots of information on the website about that. The other one is docs.moasapp.com. We've recently released a just open documentation website. Still a work in progress, but that has plenty of info on it as well. And yeah, if you want to book any meetings with me or the team, we've got a Calendly link on the website. We can do 15 minutes, hour demos, all that sort of stuff if you're interested. And yeah, that's the best way to get in contact.
And the one thing, I know we've spoken about this, but I want to put it out there, the way you've priced it is unlike a lot of firms, like tools out there where you've got to basically, you've literally got to buy into it before you're basically sign the check and you're in. Yours is different. Your pricing, people can actually jump in, have a bit of a play with it and grow into it. How does it work?
Yeah, so we actually price per client, and there's a lot of tools out there that we use in the industry, client group, I should say, and they price per client group as well, right? So the Yodlee feeds is a great example. There's fixed cost and then per client group cost because you've got access to certain things. And so what we wanted to do, though, is we didn't want to go, okay, well, it's X amount per this, per that, and then it ends up the same or more expensive than other tools you're using. So what we did was we started with the average advisor statistics from Advisor Ratings, which was 120 clients a year. And what we did was we priced it at $100 per client group per year, right? Which was, if you take that on face value, it's about $12,000 a year, right? Which is $1,000 a month you're spending on your X plans and likewise anyway. So what we did was we went, all right, well, first 10 clients are free. So that brings it down to 11. And then the majority of our advisors have less than 120 clients anyway, because they're nurturing those clients they have. So we've got one of our clients has 30 clients. And he's got 10 for free and the 20 that he gets charged on a yearly basis for. So it's $2,000 a year for your full document production and modeling, as opposed to $1,000 a month, right? Before you've actually generated any revenue. You've got to fork
so you can kind of ease into it. And like I think last time, I think the conversation we had, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but like what it could replace. But I mean, now you're at a position where if you've got my understanding is you've got a workflow management tool, like a projects or a teamwork projects or you can get rid of that. If you've got a statement of advice tool that generates, and you can get rid of that. If you're using a separate dashboard to track everything, that you can get rid of that as well. What else do you not need if you're using this?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The document production is handled, the modeling's handled. The only things most of our advisors are using are at the moment, right, until we've finished our client portal, they're using a fact-finding system and product recs for product comparisons.
I love that you're doing portals. I just think portals is the future. And I think I always think about when we have these conversations about SOAs, where they're going to be. I think if we're talking about making the document shorter and more succinct, I honestly think we're talking about faster horses. And at some point, your client's going to log into your portal and there it's going to be there. There's going to be live modeling and all the tools there and all the rest of it. Julia is just asking whether it does cash flow projections in different scenarios. I think it does, right?
Do you mind if I share real quick? I swear we can model this and produce a document in 2 minutes. Julio, are you ready?
Oh, shall I time it?
Yeah, go for it. 11:58 is my watch. I'll go by.
Okay, ready? I'll just get the thing up. I'll give you time. Okay, under 2 minutes, you're going to model a scenario. I love this.
Under 2 minutes. Let's do it. Okay, so we've got our goals here. Oh, ready to go? Ready to go.
Go.
All right, so we've got our goals: retirement planning, offset, asset growth, and long-term progress. Those are historical. our scenario data. So this is dummy data. We can duplicate from previous advice or from the current live data on the client page. We're going to call this our, oh man, the test website's letting me down. It's that little bit slower. We're going to call this our current scenario, right? And in the scenarios, it's just a streamlined version of the information we need for modeling. We're going to duplicate this. We've got our copy over here.
Yep.
Oh, the test website's really killing me today. Okay, we're going to call this our recommended, right? And we're going to jump straight into our models. Now, these are ones I've used previously. So I'm just going to include our asset growth and our offset home loans, our loan repayment one. Okay, asset growth pulls through our historic information. You can add this as you want. We take a snapshot on the way through as well. Our offset one, we're going to switch into our current scenario. We're going to add the loan that we're modeling. So we've got our loan here until the expiry date in 2038. We're going to switch to our recommended. We're going to add a loan, same one. And then we're going to add our offset, which will be the $44,000 one. Awesome. And we're going to add a contribution to this, right? So this will affect our cash flow. So we're going to add an ongoing contribution of $1,000 monthly. We're going to start this year, if I get the year right, and end in 2034. Let's do that. Cool. Awesome. So we can see that that's actually drawn it down even better because it's extra $12,000 a year. We're going to switch to our comparison. We can see that offsetting and contributing to that offset has made a massive impact, right? That's got to be a minute 30, Stu. How are we looking?
You're up to 120 so far.
120? Great. Okay, I'm just going to add a new advice agreement. This is your advice costings to produce the advice. So I'm going to choose Carolyn as our primary advisor. It took us 2 hours to create this annual review, for example. We've got some default services in here as well, which you can customize yourself. We're going to add a new document. So this is from our templater that we've got in the side here. It works exactly the same as what we're about to look at, except it's for the templating, right? We've got locked content, locked pages that our licensee doesn't want us to delete. So we've got our compliance built in. Table of contents is looking good. Our goals have come through. I obviously need to move some text boxes here. And here's our cash flow, right? So, oh man, I'm missing it. There we go, this one. I'll switch to this one. We'll look at our recommended cash flow. Wonderful. And we've got our income here. We've got estimated asset contributions. That's that $12,000 a year contribution to the offset account. And now we're going to pull in our asset growth model. Oh no, the test website's really doing me in. I'll go to the...
I think you just over, but it's pretty good, man.
Loan repayment, let's go. Okay, offset home loans. There's our offset graph, right? And here's where we're going to put our comments and recommendations. Offset the home.
Offset the home, man.
Offset the home, man. Okay, so in 2 minutes, right, we've modeled an offset account, we've created our document, and we've provided some comments and recommendations. Julio, let me know what you think, mate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Mate, we should do this more often. We shouldn't leave it, and not just talk about the tool, but we should talk about other things. But I want to ask 2 questions, and then I'm kind of going to open to any other questions. The one thing I wanted to first start by asking is the fact that it doesn't link. Like, obviously, businesses that are already, they're just not, for them, data feeds are not as important. And there's a whole bunch there. I know some of the best businesses that I've worked with, they don't use data feeds. It's just not necessarily. But like when you have businesses that have kind of just been brought up to the idea that, oh, you've got to have data feeds. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think some of those businesses.
Is it a shift?
It's a little bit of a shift. I think some of those businesses are entrenched in incumbent softwares. I won't name names. And that's working for them. And that's cool, right? The majority of our advisors that we obviously started implementing with and now are working with already have solutions to that stuff where they're not content with the current offerings of an incumbent, for example, right? So I think there's this sort of myth, though, and I might lose a lot of your audience here, but there's this myth where if the number is there, just run with it and do it. And advisors have had it too good for too long, in my opinion, where that number has been there and they've just sort of gone, all right, yeah, we're just going to run with it. But the reality is... The number
being the number in the system.
Number in the system, right?
Yeah, cool.
So the reality is a lot of advisors will go, okay, number's there. I'm going to send a power planning briefing off. It's going to come back in 3 weeks. There's going to be stuff we're going to have to change and send it off for another 2 weeks, right? What we wanted to get away from was that reliance on just the number being there. So if you've got your third-party tool, come in and update it. We've got our teams and our solo advisors that are updating these values throughout the year anyway. A classic was, we had We had a super platform that wasn't connected to any data feeds anyway, so we had to manually get those statements. And then, of course, with your big players, the data feeds were down for a month, so we had to go and get them manually anyway. Right. So we went, look, we can't rely on doing the data feed piece this early on. It's probably too much. At the time, it was too much for our team to tackle. And it's definitely a shift. I think going from, the dependence on the data feeds to actually going, well, look, I'm looking this stuff up anyway. We're missing insurance feeds too, so we've got to look that up manually. It's tricky.
So that question, I think, like obviously importing and exporting, like I always say to people, if you can't get if it's not clear how you can get your data out of a platform, you need to really be careful about what you're putting into it. And obviously, and Julio's made the point, if you're transitioning across from another platform, or you do have a fact-finding software that'll spit out a CSV file, can you map that and upload it pretty easily, or is that something that you need to engage your team to do?
Yeah, 100%. So, we'd engage with it, but there's no cost. We don't believe in any of that nonsense. We've had so many people download data from other systems and get charged for it, which is nuts when you look at like data access laws and stuff, right?
It's common though, right? It's not uncommon practice for software providers to hold the data ransom. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's super common and it's nuts, right? So we don't charge for imports, uploads, exports, any of that stuff. We have some standard stuff that's mapped. Like we have like your generic X-Plan download that's just like client names and that sort of stuff. We have that pre-mapped. So depending on what you download, we can just put it straight in from our end and it goes straight up. Other stuff like maybe more specific asset liability info, we just take a little bit of time to tweak that so it fits into our format.
But like, for example, if I had a fact-finding tool and I could get my team to put it into a CSV file, and would you give me, format these CSV files so it's got these headings, and then I could just upload it straight in? Is that the way it would work?
Yeah, absolutely. So with some stuff, we'd do that. And then with things that are more complex where you're like, hey, I don't know what's going on here, we're happy to look at that and figure out where it fits. So
in terms of, and this is kind of the big question, in terms of you've worked with businesses and predominantly I'm assuming they're transitioning across from another platform. How long does it take? How long does it take to get them up and running? And I guess here's the $1 million question. What benefits do you generally see that they're getting from being on a tool like yours?
Great question. So we had a recent signed up on the Monday. We have a bunch of default templates available, produced advice during the week, and we obviously a lot of hand holding in that process and knowledge transfer and understanding. Produced the SOA on the Friday, delivered it the following week. So that was a week to get a client through a new SOA. So that was amazing for us. Just as an experience, we went, did that actually happen that quickly, right? And then for bigger businesses, we, depending on your import process and how that works, depending on how many staff are going to use it from day one is a whole other thing. But generally with advisors, we're individual advisors. So let's say if we pilot with a small team and we bring in 10, 20, 30 clients, generally it's about a week before you're feeling really confident and producing documents. And then in terms of what you get out of it, I mean, ease of use is massive. Our original business we implemented with Wealthmed, they had an internal study of 7 hours and 20 minutes to produce an annual review. We got that down to 2 hours and 10 minutes on average. And that was 1,200 documents in 2 years. So we're pretty comfortable with that number, right? And then client experience. I mean, the difference we've had in client experience is incredible. So we've had retirees that have come in that have gone, you know what, can the font be bigger? Can I read this easier? Yes, you can obviously change all of that. But also just the general understanding, if this is going to sound silly, this is a terrible analogy, right? But in some models, if line goes up, it's good. If line goes down, it's bad, right? Being able to convey that really, really simply when you're talking about retirement, capital maintenance is super important. So client experience has been brilliant. The feedback we've had from our advisors for using it, and obviously we're really reactive as well. As soon as there's something the advisors feel like we should change, we work on. And then client experience with documents has been phenomenal. Like we are so happy with the experience that our end users, which is your clients, are receiving. So we're super stoked with that.
Mate, congratulations. I mean, I know you guys have been working your asses off really hard, and I know you're at that stage where you've got a great tool. You've got a small team. You put your hearts into it, and I think and we talked about you just need to reach that tipping point when you can start to reinvest and expand the team. And it sounds like it's headed that direction really, really quickly. So, mate, it's so good to watch and see.
Cheers, Stu. It certainly feels that way. So we sort of went to market in October last year, and obviously Christmas is really quiet. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 signups since going back to business in January. So yeah, we're hitting the ground running pretty hard, and there's so much more left to come. You know, we've got, like I said before, we've got the meat and veg now. All the niceties and stuff that we get to add on with your client portals and data feeds is just going to take it to a new level. Portal's
going to be incredible. We should talk about that because I love portal. Well, you know, I mean, like I've had more portals than I have had dinners in the last 10 years. So that's not true. I've had definitely a lot of dinners. Mate, any final thoughts? And by the way, if there's any questions you want to pop up, I know Julia, you've asked a question. Martin, really appreciate your thoughts. Any final thoughts you want to make?
Yeah, I think, look, general advice to advisors in the industry is, you know, keep your ear to the ground. There are solutions out there now like Product Rex, man. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of it. It's a free to use tool for product comparisons, right? So when things like that come up, you've got to be willing to dip the toe in the water and see what's happening there. And we're certainly getting a lot of that with advisors now that are going solo or, you know, changing licensee structure. And that's not to say that we're just a self-licensed like practice working with it or anything. Yep. But yeah, definitely keeping your ear to the ground, fingers on the pulse, and play with everything. The AI tools that are out there now for general writing and general help are incredible. So yeah, lots of great tech coming, but definitely try and make the most of it, I think.
I read a report because I was preparing for a presentation I got to give where it indicated that where am I going with this? Yeah, the second largest market share currently is by a tool that's only come around in the last 4 or 5 years, and it was created by practice and is getting real traction. And I think we're now starting to see these tools like yours that have actually been forged, not in, with all due respect, corporate headquarters by software developers who've never actually seen a financial planning business. They've actually been forged from being, you know, actually road tested. So that's what's exciting about it. You've got this whole generation of tools coming out that actually do what's needed. And I think you're a massive part of that. So congratulations.
Cheers, Stu. Yeah, I actually think that's where that disconnect sort of been, right? Is it's either software built by advisors through third-party tech companies or vice versa, like tech companies building it without advice input. So to have that, I think that's what's really benefited us was to have that collaboration between the two.
Absolutely agree. Julia, he's full of questions. You guys should definitely catch up and have a chat because I think you'll like what he's got. To be honest, anybody watching this, you should reach out and just jump in there and have get the free sort of account because I mean it's once you get in there you realize how easy it is. Julia wants to know, are you going to integrate with Product Rex?
Julia, fantastic question. So it's certainly on our radar. We haven't put the feelers out just yet, but it's definitely like if we can get to a point where you can do your Product Rex modeling and comparisons and we can pull that into the document, that's definitely where we want to be. But if we can get to that point, there's no question. That's certainly where we want to go.
Free as well, so the price is right.
Yeah, totally.
Mate, always a pleasure. Enjoy it. What do you got planned for the weekend? Anything good?
I'm coaching soccer this year. So I've got a few games on this weekend. And then Sunday, I think we're going to go up to Noosa, maybe go for a swim if the weather's right. So
nice. Are you playing and coaching or?
No, I wish. I think my playing days are a bit behind me. So just trying to learn. It must be injury because it's not age, put it that way. Oh, no, definitely not injury. It's just I think the lungs don't do what they should do. There's some players out there that can just run, and I don't think I'm one of them, sadly.
Yeah, it's kind of that game. I remember when we used to do training, and you just like the first 40 minutes was just running, and it's easier to play when you're fit, I guess.
Totally, it totally is. Yeah,
mate. Thanks again for your time. Have a great weekend, and everybody, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stu.
See ya. Bye. There we have it, another Finnovator episode done and dusted, and I hope you took a lot out of this. It's an interesting space, this practice technology space, and it's one that I'm increasingly getting asked to jump in with practices and trying to diagnose what they need to do, what they need to cull, where they need to go. I actually took some time to re-record the whole presentation that I gave at the Risk Info tour, which is, by the way, is amazing to be on a tour, which for the first time in probably 5 years was completely sold out, full room, a lot of advisors getting together, having discussions, and in particular, credit to Peter and the team. They rolled out a session that was wholly focused on risk. either for specialists, but as is more the case now, for businesses for which risk provides an important element of the advice they provide to clients. I actually re-recorded that presentation because I thought it was something that was worth sharing. So if you would like to be able to see that particular session that I ran at the Risk in Focus Roadshow, along with a whole bunch of other resources, you can head across to our Practice Success portal at success.outlier.com.au. Just sign up to register and you will get access to that. You'll get access to our ebook series, of which we're building more and more of those based on our fast track training programs. You'll get access to our free Practice Success training course, which is a 4-part course which covers value proposition, as well as the e-version of our Goodyear Journal, which retails on Amazon for about $30, I think it is. So would love you to join the community, be part of what we're trying to build. I think we just tipped over 200 members, which has been a really great thing in a short space of time. Yeah, so if you'd like to be part of that, head over. Other than that, stay tuned for another upcoming episode of The Finnovator.